Thanks everybody for joining. It's something we're really excited about. You'll hear a lot today that education is important to Nelnet Renewable Energy, but also Eric and I in particular in our roles and just kind of the people we are. Education is important. So there's going to be a lot in this webinar we're going to cover. But I guess what we'll start off by doing is just quick intros of myself and Eric. And I'll start us off. So my name is Michael Williams. I'm one of the commercial consultants here at Nelnet Renewable Energy. I've been with the company for about 2 years now as a consultant, and I've been in the industry for about 5 years also as a consultant. So got about 5 years of experience in consulting customers, projects, big and small, kind of all the above. But currently, I specialize in medium to large scale projects, I would call it, which really involve similarly medium to large businesses or not-for-profits or organizations that I'm working with. And in that role, I do a lot of educating, I like to think, just educating what the different aspects of a project entail when it comes to, solar in general, but also the details when it comes to customers' needs in determining what a tailored system will look like for them and the different incentives that are involved when it comes to local incentives, federal incentives, state incentives. And so I kind of break down those different aspects of a project really to help educate the customer along the process. And so that's been about my background and what I do for the company and what I do for my customers. And like I said, really excited about today. How about you, Eric?
Thanks, Michael. A lot of things that Michael just mentioned about his role in the company are exactly the same role that I have in the company. And in addition to that, Michael and I work very closely together, and we're very similar on how we view our roles in our jobs and how we view our customers. So a lot of things that he said about himself, I would echo for myself. I've also been in the solar business working on commercial solar projects for a little over 5 years. I'm going to say a couple more things that apply to me, and I think they also apply to Michael. I don't really view my job as ending when I get a sale. Even though, as a commercial solar consultant, it is kind of a sales role. But that's not really where it ends. It actually almost just starts because there's a lot that has to happen, a lot of coordination once a contract gets signed and once we start the engineering and things like that. And Michael and I stay involved in the project until it gets installed and energized. And even after that, I have customers that, I sold projects to 5 years ago. Their system's been up and running for 4 years, and I get calls still from them if they have questions or issues, and I can kind of put them in the right direction. So our role is truly more of a consultant role, a helping role, and a service role for both of us. All right. So the next slide that we're going to go over is, we introduced ourselves. Now we're going to introduce this webinar. I think it's important for everyone to know kind of what this webinar is about and what it's not about. I'm not going to read the agenda that we put together here, but I'm going to add a little bit of color. This webinar is really an overview of commercial solar in Northern Illinois. Some of the things we talk about will apply to commercial solar in general in other states. There's also some information that, the Southern Illinois, Northern Illinois have a lot of similarities, but this webinar really is intended to benefit mostly businesses, organizations that are in Northern Illinois and have ComEd as their utility. So that is kind of the point of today. We've got a lot of ground to cover. There's no way we probably could cover everything even in an hour, and we certainly don't want to talk for an hour, and we're not. So we're going to move kind of fast. There's really not going to be an opportunity today for a deep dive on any one topic, but there's going to be opportunities at the end to go a little bit deeper on any topics that people are interested in. And at any point during this discussion, you can put questions in the chat, and we'll respond to those at the very end. There's going to be a time for questions. I would say the unique value proposition of this webinar can be best presented with 3 R's. The first R is real. This information is going to be real. Michael and I are going to be very real today. Another word for real is transparent and honest. So you're going to be able to rely on this information. What we're going to tell you today is going to be true. It's not hearsay. It's not what we heard from somebody else, but it's truth coming from our own experiences working in the industry for over 5 years, each of us. It's also going to be very relevant. So we've worked with hundreds of organizations, helping them navigate the solar decision process and the solar industry and all the different aspects of it. And so we know exactly what you as an organization need to know about commercial solar to decide if this is something you want to look more into and pursue. And then the last R is that this information is going to be reliable. Again, with all of our experience, we know exactly what is true and what is not true. We're not sharing what other people have told us, and we're just believing other people. We've got, a lot of projects that have already been installed, customers that are happy and received the savings that we kind of forecasted they would, and received the incentive money that we kind of forecasted they would. So again, all this information today is based on real information directly from our own personal experiences working with our customers. I'll also tell you what this webinar today is not. It's not a sales pitch. At no point, we promise you, is this going to turn creepy and corner you in a separate private chat room and try to convince you to go solar. So there'll be none of that today either. Also, Michael, I was thinking about it. The vibe of this webinar today is definitely more conversational. We're going to kind of go back and forth a few times and have some fun, just kind of like we were all sitting around talking. And in that way, it's maybe more like a podcast, or even I was thinking like a talk show. What do you think about that?
I love it. That's
right.
what I'm going for too. So I love it.
Cool. Not the bad type of talk show though. Not like Jerry Springer, but like the good type of talk show, like maybe Oprah. But we're not giving away cars today. So anyway, that's just a little bit more about today. And again, I want to reemphasize that everything we talk about today is going to help you make a decision about solar, whether to continue to learn about it or to kind of take the next step forward, that type of thing. All right, can we turn to the next slide? And Mike is going to tell us about Nelnet Renewable Energy.
Beautiful. Thanks, Eric. I love it. So a little bit about Nelnet Renewable Energy. It's a unique background we have as a company. So Nelnet Renewable Energy has been involved, or Nelnet's been involved in solar for several years, and that's more involved in the tax equity, tax syndication, tax credit space. But in 2022, Nelnet actually acquired EPC firm Giarny Solar. And you hear the word EPC, a lot of times people think, what is EPC? EPC means engineering, procurement, and construction firm. Essentially a full turnkey service firm. A bit about Giarny Solar. It was established in 2012, founded in 2012, and actually soon after became a pretty big player in the commercial, residential, and just in solar market in general in the Midwest, in Illinois specifically as well. Again, they're involved in the residential, commercial, and industrial space, as well as some utility size projects as well. Soon after the acquisition of Giarny Solar, we were branded to be more inclusive. Nelnet Renewable Energy is our new rebranding name, and we've been operating off that for some time now. And I guess with that Nelnet attachment, people hear Nelnet, and it sounds pretty familiar. So Nelnet Renewable Energy is part of the Nelnet Inc. Company. So Nelnet Inc. is a very large financial service company, actually one of the largest in the country, and they're a publicly traded company as well. And so I think with our background, we want to highlight that we do possess, extensive renewable energy and green construction background that spans multiple decades. And so it's important for us to communicate that, because solar is a young industry, but it's a growing industry and it's changing. But being that it's young and it's a newer industry, it's hard to find sometimes a seasoned veteran, firm to work with. And I feel like with our unique background with Nelnet and Giarny Solar, we do have the opportunity to provide our customers with a unique offering that others can't. And that's pretty exciting for us to utilize our skills, utilize our background to provide a service that we think is pretty unique, and we're excited about that. So, it's important for us to provide a service that's obviously 5-star, and also it's hassle-free, where we're using our background, our expertise to provide solutions that are, again, tailored to not just solar in general, but tailored to a specific customer and their needs. So, like I said, that's kind of a bit about Nelnet, our background, who we are, what we do for our customers in respect to projects.
Hey, Michael, this is a Northern Illinois webinar. Do we do work outside of Northern Illinois?
10-4, we do work outside of Northern Illinois. So we do work. We are very involved in the Illinois market, have been for a long time. And so I would like to say we're a big deal in Illinois. A lot of people see our work all over the state. We also do work in New York. We have offices in Colorado and Nebraska as well. So those are we've done work in, I think the number is 13 to 14 different states. But I would say we're heavy Illinois, heavy New York, and Colorado and Nebraska. It's a good question. So we're going to jump into some fun market info that recently has been shared. That I think is just fun to look at where we've come from, where we're going, where we're heading, and where do we as a country, state, where do we land in those markets? So new fun recent market update we've gotten is that we have reached 5 million solar installs in the nation, which is a pretty big milestone, something we're really excited about. Now, it took us 40 years to get there. So it did take some time to get there, but over the past 40 years, we've reached 5 million solar installs. I think what's more exciting about that is that 4 million of the last 5 million installs took place after 2016. So I think that really shows the acceleration that we're looking at currently in the market. The growth in the past 8 to 10 years has been substantial. And so we're forecasted in the next decade to hit 10 million installs, which obviously would double our growth. So I think those are just fun figures to look at, that people are trusting into solar because they're seeing more of it. They're talking to people and seeing how it works, and so it's a fun stat to kind of look at. In respect to the United States and where we stand as a country, we're actually top 10 country for solar energy production. And I think about that. I think about a lot of times when we think of solar, we in the industry, people in general, a lot of European countries are very strong and heavy into solar renewables. And so it's, top 10 is actually an awesome stat. I think we're actually top 5. We're a key player in the world when it comes to renewable energy, forward thinking, pushing renewables in a good way. And so I think that's a fun fact to look at and see kind of where we rank as a country. In respect to Illinois, we are ranked at 14th when it comes to solar production in the United States. We're actually one of the fastest growing states when it comes to the solar sector. And actually in 2023, we were top 10 in the country, top 10 state when it comes to solar, commercial solar projects being installed. And again, I think what that highlights and reflects is that there is dynamic growth happening in the United States, but also in Illinois specifically. And I think a lot of that goes to our policies that we have in place, the different incentives that are available to customers that really help push that and make it make sense for people in the state to really start looking at and pursuing. So I think these stats really highlight where we've come from, and our past successes, but also where we're going and the opportunity ahead of us. So a little bit about the market and kind of what's happening, what's going on. So yeah, it's exciting stuff.
Hey, Michael, I'm feeling kind of serious. Like, I think I need to loosen up a little bit. How about you?
What do you got, Eric?
Well, I was on my deck this morning drinking my daily pot of coffee, and I came up with a solar joke. My own joke. I made it up. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's hear it.
Why don't solar panels drink coffee?
Why don't solar panels drink coffee?
You only get 10 seconds. We're moving fast, remember?
All right. I got 5 more seconds. Something to do with black coffee, no suns. Yeah. I don't know. What do you got for me?
They're already wired.
That's good. I can appreciate a good joke. I'm not good at them.
I feel looser now. So thank you for taking that 7th inning stretch with me. All right. Michael was just talking about all that growth. And again, going back to the 3 R's, real, relevant, reliable. Why is that relevant? Like, why did we put that in the in our discussion today? Well, we're going to talk about why all this growth is happening next. And so this slide is from our experience. Michael and I have talked through this together. We came up with this presentation together. These are the top 4 reasons that we hear people are looking into solar and deciding to make the decision to go solar. Now, we're not going to talk about all 4 today. We're moving fast. We're not going to deep dive. So we're going to talk about the 2 main reasons that we have learned and seen organizations go solar. Number 1 is saving money. So whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, the bottom line and budgets are really important in any organization. So obviously, with solar being a big financial investment, there's got to be some type of return in order for people to make that decision on an increasing basis. So the number 1 reason is saving money, and that happens in 2 ways. The first way is solar incentives right now are very, very robust. Solar incentives in Northern Illinois for a for-profit organization are probably going to reimburse the organization 100% for their out-of-pocket costs for the solar system. So solar incentives right now will cover the cost of a solar system. The second way that a company is going to save money by going solar is by saving on their energy costs. And, they're going to save anywhere from, depending on how you funded the project, anywhere from 15% to 50% on your electricity costs. I have customers that save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on electricity costs because they've gone solar. These are really large projects. Not everyone's going to save that much money. But I would say on average, a company can expect to save anywhere from 6 cents to 10 cents per kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour of solar energy that their system produces. So saving money is the number 1 reason we see the reason organizations are going solar. The number 2 reason that we see and hear why organizations are interested in solar and going solar is for sustainability goals. Now, those come in 2 different forms. The most common right now in the United States and in Northern Illinois are internal sustainability goals. These are self-mandated. The most common one, I've met with dozens of organizations that have the same exact goal. It's called RE100 by 2030. In other words, these companies are like, hey, we're committing to have 100% of our electricity coming from renewable energy by the year 2030. And a big part of how they're accomplishing that is through solar energy. The second type of goals that we're seeing, less, of course, for now, but it's going to be increasing, is externally mandated goals. So in the United States, the best example I can give of this is there's an initiative in Colorado called Energize Denver. Michael and I don't work in the Denver market, but we have colleagues that do. So we're slightly familiar with it, and I'm going to summarize it for you. Buildings over a certain size, let's just say it's 50,000 square feet or something like that, I don't know the number, are required in this initial phase to assess their building, and they're going to get a score, like a sustainability score. Then phase 2 is going to come along where they have a deadline, a date where they have to submit to the city of Denver or the organization that's overseeing this initiative what their plan is to improve that score to an acceptable level. And then phase 3 of this initiative is going to be they actually have to implement their plan by a certain date or deadline. So that's like a real life example right here in the United States where that's a pretty big deal. It's costing organizations money to do the assessment, and it's costing organizations money to create this plan. And then of course it's going to cost them money to execute the plan. So that's one example in the United States. I would say internationally, European companies their sustainability statements are already being audited exactly like a financial statement is being audited. And in the United States, if your financial statements get audited and it's been determined that you've made some claims that aren't true, like you can get fined for that. And that's a real thing in European countries. So that's probably coming to the United States, I would think. And even a more kind of dramatic external mandate is that as of January 1st, 2023, Ireland implemented a carbon footprint tax. I don't know if that's the exact name of the tax, but you get the idea. And companies are being taxed based on, their carbon footprint or their lack of initiatives to be more sustainable. So those are the top two reasons why, organizations are going solar that Michael and I have seen and heard. Energy independence is also a reason that we hear. It's definitely farther along on the scale. And then, of course, saving the planet. Not that that's not a good reason, but I would say that, it doesn't affect the bottom line. So I think it's just farther down the food chain as far as a main reason why to go solar. All right. Could you go to the next slide? Thank you very much, Justin. All right. So now we're going to get into the nitty gritty, the stuff that everyone's been waiting for. When we do these initial solar discussions, everyone is surprised that we're as forthcoming as we are on an initial call with, the economics of solar. A lot of times people like to withhold those things to control the conversation. Michael and I have a more transparent approach where we want to educate people right out of the gate because, without knowing the economics, it's hard for people to make a decision to move forward or to determine if this is something they should investigate. So we're going to do that today a little bit as well. We're going to give you some high-level information. So these are 5 of the incentives, the most important incentives, the most common incentives that almost every organization in Northern Illinois is going to benefit from. I can lump these into 3 categories. The federal tax credit makers, those are tax incentives. So those are going to reduce your tax liability. That's how you'll actually recover money from your solar investment. Then the next category would be the solar renewable energy certificates, otherwise known as SRECs, and then the DG rebate. I'm going to put those in a category called Illinois. The SRECs are coming from an Illinois energy bill from 2019, and the DG rebate is actually coming from ComEd, Northern Illinois Utility. So those are pretty exclusive to Illinois. Now, net metering is kind of in its own category, and I'm going to call it a soft incentive. You're not actually going to ever be receiving money, whether in the form of a reduction in taxes or in a check in the mail. But net metering is really important because it guarantees that as an organization, you're going to get credit for every kilowatt hour of solar energy that's produced from your system. So if you overproduce solar energy at times, like on a Sunday in July, and your business is closed, your organization is closed for the day, but it's your number 1 solar production day of the year, you're probably going to have excess solar energy that's going to go back to the grid. Good news is with net metering in Illinois, you're going to get 100% full credit for that kilowatt hour you're sending back to the grid. And just a few numbers. Michael touched on it earlier, and we're going to touch on it again in the next slide. The tax credits, I would say, are going to range anywhere from 50% of the cost of the project to 80% of the cost of the project, depending on a few different variables. I would say in Northern Illinois, the average value of the tax credit is probably going to be around 60% of the cost of the project. Then when we get into the Illinois incentives, the SRECs and the DG rebates, that's going to range anywhere from 35% to 50% of the cost of the project. Again, depending on a few different variables of each specific project. And I would say the average value of these Illinois incentives is usually around 40% of the value of the project. So you got 60 and 40. That's, again, what we said a few slides ago. Solar is going to cover generally about 100% of the cost of the project in Northern Illinois. And with the net metering, again, kind of a slide earlier, you're going to save 6 to 10 cents per kilowatt hour by going solar, and that's kind of part of the value of net metering. Justin, could you go to the next slide for Michael?
Awesome, Eric. Thanks. I think, too, to highlight what you just communicated there, too. I mean, with the tax credit and depreciation, like you mentioned, just to highlight that between those two alone, you're going to cover 60 to 70, 80% of the project cost there. And so kind of what we wanted to do here is provide a case study of, real projects that we were doing, and kind of an idea of what these incentives values look like when you put it against the actual project that you're looking to install. And so here you're going to look at a case study that's a suburb Chicago project. So it'd be a ComEd territory project, and a little bit about a project like this for a for-profit entity. Rough electrical spend of $60,000 a year on the supply side. So, you'll notice when we kind of do our analysis, we'll kind of break down your power bills, and in your power bills, you'll see that you have a supply power bill, a supply side of your power bill, which is based on your consumption, and then you're going to have your demand or fixed costs that we unfortunately can't really touch with solar. And so when we're looking at solar and what solar can do for your business, typically we're referring to how's it impacting your supply. You're gonna pull less electricity from the power from the utility, and therefore you're going to have a lower bill. And so again, this customer here roughly spending $60,000 annually on the supply side. And so indicative pricing here, looking at $1 million system, and we're going to break down the incentives that apply to that. So you'll see here that this system at $1 million qualifies for a federal investment tax credit. So these tax credits are based on the percentage of the project. So the standard federal tax credit for a solar project, is 30%. So it's 30% of the project cost. With the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a bill that was passed not too long ago, there's the ability to receive adders to your traditional tax credit. And one of those big adders we're referring to is going to be locations that are, I guess, facilities that are located in energy communities, we call them. And actually, every year the IRS releases a map that shows what facilities are located in an energy community. And if you do, in fact, reside in one of those communities, there's a 10% adder. And so in this situation here, this project qualifies for a 10% adder, bring their tax credit total to 40% or $400,000. And a neat thing about that map that the IRS releases, it shows that most of Chicagoland, when I say Chicagoland, I'm referring to the suburbs as well, actually is in a energy community. Not all, but most is. And so most of the projects that we are working with in the ComEd territory do, in fact, qualify for a 40% tax credit. So 40% tax credit equals $400,000 in this $1 million project. The next program we're looking at is a DG rebate. Some call it the ComEd rebate. Some call it the Smart Inverter rebate. And that's based on system size. It's a state level program. And that's a $100,000 incentive that you receive in the form of a check. Same thing for the SREC incentive, the Solar Renewable Energy Certificate or Credit Incentive. That's valued at $327,000 and actually is paid out. And how that works is that it's paid out over a 7-year period. So our customers who are getting this program, they're getting paid quarterly payments every quarter for the next 7 years until they've totaled $327,000. And so again, that's a state level program that again, and that's why you're seeing a lot of solar in Illinois. The growth that we talked about a few slides ago, part of that is the SREC incentive, the DG rebate, the policies and incentives we have in Illinois specifically that we're seeing a lot of growth in this state. And then the last two incentives you're going to see are the depreciation savings you're going to receive going solar. So obviously, like any investment you make as a business, you can depreciate that investment. Same thing here. There are exceptions that you are able to utilize accelerated depreciation. So there is a substantial amount of savings you can save in that regard as well. So state level in this scenario here, we're showing about $40,000 in savings, and the federal level about $200,000 in savings. A few things to highlight with all these incentives, though, are that they are all reimbursement incentives. So there is capital required. So a lot of times you might hear that solar's free. Solar's not free. Granted, there are incentives in place that really cover the entire cost of the system, but there is capital typically required up front, investment required up front, and you receive these incentives through the form of a reimbursement. And so I want to highlight that. And then as we talk about tax credit and depreciation savings, Eric and I can tell you what you qualify for as far as those incentives go. But it's important that your organization looks and talks to your tax consultants, your CPAs, your tax advisors to really take a deeper look into your tax liability to make sure you have the tax appetite to utilize these incentives. And so just want to highlight that it's important that you do consult your tax experts in that regard. And then just kind of highlight and just look back here that this $1 million system is receiving well over 100% of an incentive to cover the costs. And so the net cost of this project here, you're seeing a negative $66,000 net cost. And so in this scenario, we're seeing that the project cost, which is, again, this is real projects, aren't covered by the incentives. And that's pretty standard. We would say, in general, to be conservative, you can expect 75% to 100+% in incentive to cover your project costs. So, again, just want to kind of provide some context and some perspective as what these incentives are doing, how they're applied. And, we could probably spend, an hour talking about each different incentive, the details of it, but just kind of give you a high-level view of the impact they have on projects.
Mike, I want to be mindful of time, but I think it's important to clarify. Would you please share what the difference between like a for-profit and nonprofit would be, using that last slide as an example?
Yeah. So one thing that we saw several years ago is that a lot of, again, for-profit organizations were utilizing solar. They saw the value in going solar because it cash flowed for them. Nonprofits, there was a slower adoption because the federal tax credit, for an example, and the depreciation, as you can see, those add up to a substantial amount of incentive for the project. Well, nonprofits can't utilize those. And so with the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, now nonprofits can utilize the tax credit in the form of a direct pay or elective pay, which means that the IRS or the federal government will write you a check and submit a check to you for the value equal to the tax credit. So if you are a for-profit business or nonprofit, and qualify for a 40% tax credit, you will receive a direct payment from the federal government equal to the tax credit you would have qualified for if you were a for-profit business. So that's super neat, super helpful, and allows nonprofits to utilize and go solar. And we're seeing a lot more interest in nonprofits seeing the value of solar because they have that incentive there. They also qualify for the DG rebate, the SREC incentive. However, the state depreciation, federal depreciation is not applicable to them because of, obviously, you need to have tax liability for that. So hopefully that answers the question. I'm happy to touch on that more later.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Next slide. And before I start this slide, I just want to say, like Michael mentioned earlier, like when we kicked off the webinar, that we're going to have follow-up webinars to do like a deeper dive on very specific topics. And some of you might be thinking, and maybe all of you might be thinking, well, if we have to put this money up and invest in solar, like how is everyone funding all these projects? Well, we probably will do a webinar specifically on how solar projects are funded. There's a lot of different ways you can fund a solar project, and we can do a whole webinar on that. And of course, during the question Q&A time, if someone wants to ask that question, we're more than happy to share a little bit on it at that point too. All right, we started at 9:02. We have 2 minutes. So I'm going to blow through this slide right here. So there's a lot of detail, a lot of words, a lot of icons. What I want to leave you with here is that a solar project is not like replacing your HVAC system. It's a full-on construction project requiring, approvals, requiring significant engineering. There's a lot of entities that are getting involved with solar for safety reasons and for environmental reasons. And it just takes a while to get all these approvals. And even the decision process, it says 6 to 12 months. That's not our timeline. That's just Michael and I. We've experienced working with organizations that 6 to 12 months is the typical time it takes for an organization to make the decision to go solar. The installation process itself, again, we could be waiting, 4+ months for ComEd to give approval to interconnect the system to the grid. So it's not so much our timeline for the installation that's going to take 12 to 18 months. Our installation will take anywhere from 2 months to 6 months, depending on the size of the project. But again, it's all the approvals that are required before we can start installing the system. And then, post install 30 years, that's the typical life of a solar system. So it is a big investment. It takes a long time to install, requires a lot of capital to invest in solar. The good news is it's a 30-year asset with very little maintenance. So that's one point I want to leave you with. Another point I want to leave you with is Nelnet Renewable Energy is somewhat unique in that we cover all three of these phases. And I've said for years, we're the before, during, and after company. It's kind of corny, but I like to talk in simple terms with people. We're vertically integrated. We self-perform. So when you hire us, you're actually going to work with us. And I think that's really important because, the company that is selling the project is also the company now that's responsible for engineering the project, building the project, and it's the same company that is going to be around for testing and monitoring and maintenance. So I think this slide is important because it kind of gives people some expectation of how long this process takes and also like who you should be looking for to work with, that type of thing. Justin, could you cue up the last slide?
Awesome. Well, thanks, Eric. Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I mean, really what's next here is that I know we put a lot out there. Again, we're going to have some other webinars to follow up with, but kind of what to expect from us next is that we would like to send you a survey, with some feedback for us, Eric and I, and Nelnet. So, and if you do, in fact, that survey, we will send you a Starbucks gift card. So look out for that next week or so. And then, number two is that if it makes sense for you and you're prepared and ready, Eric and I are happy to help, consult you and provide a solar assessment to really highlight in detail for your organization specifically what solar looks like, what it looks like in respect to where it's going to go, cost. We'll do kind of a brief debrief review of your electrical bills and kind of just break down the different incentives that apply to that project. So that's one route to go there if it makes sense for you. If you're not ready for that and you would like to learn more, Eric and I are happy to do a company lunch and learn at your organization where we can come in, just educate you and your staff, you and your leadership on what solar is, what it isn't, kind of break down some high level details of what to expect when looking at solar. And then, like I said, last but not least, we will again be hosting other webinars where we'll hopefully provide some educational context and more background and detail on specific topics that are relevant to you all. So that's what's next, what you can look out for. And I think at this point now, again, we're a little late, but if there are any questions, I look in the chat here. I don't see any questions. But if you do have questions, we'll hang out for a few minutes and answer questions you have.
Michael, I'll warm up the crowd a little bit. See if maybe if we can get some questions out of some other people.
Deal.
I have a question for you. Is there an expiration date on these incentives? All these incentives that are equal to 100% of the cost of the project, are they around forever?
They're not. And actually, Eric, what I'd let you do, I want to turn it back to you. I want to make you answer that question. They're not. The short answer is no. But how about you dive into it?
All right. So they're not going to be around forever. When I first got in the business, I kind of asked the same question, like, wow, Illinois got all these great incentives. What's going to happen? And the owner of the company at the time, Eric Peterman, said, well, whenever I have questions like that, I always look at what's going on in California because they're 5 or 10 years ahead of us. And so if you look in California, net metering is phasing out. That was one of the incentives we talked about earlier today. They did have some additional incentive money in the state of Illinois, like hard money. That's no longer available. So the incentives are designed to accelerate and grow something like the solar industry. It's not designed to fund it forever. But having said that, there is commitments to funding through, I think, 2032. So we do have quite a long runway here. Not all the incentives are funded through 2032. Like the ComEd incentive is going to be reviewed on an annual basis. But the federal tax credit, I believe, is 2030 to 2032 that it's funded for. And then also the Illinois SREC program is also funded to 2030 or 2032, something like that. So definitely funding in the short term. 10 years from now, we don't really know what's going to happen.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for the quick turnaround and response there. Appreciate it. Looks like there's no questions in the chat here, so I think we can wrap it up. And obviously, Eric and I will share our information with you all as well, and it may actually be on the next slide. So if there are questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to both of us or one of us. Doesn't really matter. You have our email addresses there, our phone numbers. Happy to have a conversation. Again, more just educational more than anything. I think Eric and I know for a fact we both really value education. So, yeah, let's look out for that survey. Look out for the webinar dates, and also look out for, just those gift cards as well if you fill out a survey. So, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it, and thanks for connecting.
Thanks everybody.